Come closer, dear reader. Let me draw you into a story that has haunted me for years, a tale that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I recall it. Let me share a tale that chills me to the bone. It is a story of love, hope, and the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. It happened long ago, but the memory still haunts my waking hours. Every tick of the clock, every shadow that moves, reminds me of that fateful time. It all began in that old house, perched atop Widow's Hill. A place that seemed to call out to us, beckoning with its eerie charm and mysterious allure. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out at the world. They seemed to hold secrets, whispering tales of sorrow and despair to anyone who dared to listen. Little did we know the horrors that lurked within. The house was more than just wood and stone. It was a living entity, waiting for its next victims. We were a young couple then, my husband and I, filled with dreams of a future in our new home. How naive we were. We saw only the beauty and potential, blind to the darkness that awaited us. The house welcomed us with open arms, or so we thought. It seemed to embrace us, wrapping us in its cold, deceptive comfort. It was a grand old mansion, full of forgotten grandeur and echoing silence. Each room held a story, each hallway a whisper of the past. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay and the weight of untold secrets. It was as if the very walls were alive, breathing in our presence. From the very first night, I felt a presence, an unseen force that seemed to watch our every move, lurking in the shadows, waiting. A coldness that seeped into my bones, a feeling of being watched. It was an unsettling sensation, one that I could not shake off, but I dismissed it as nerves. After all, moving into a new home can be a daunting experience, filled with uncertainties and anxieties. It was an old house after all. Old houses have their quirks, their noises, their own way of settling into the night. It was only natural for it to have a few creaks and groans. We told ourselves it was just the house adjusting to its new inhabitants. Oh, how I wish I had listened to my instincts. If only I had paid attention to the signs, perhaps we could have avoided the nightmare that was to come. The days grew shorter, and the shadows in the house grew longer. Strange things began to happen. Doors would slam shut on their own. Footsteps echoed in the dead of night. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. One evening, as I was dusting the grand fireplace in the parlour, I noticed a small, locked door hidden behind a tapestry. Curiosity piqued. I searched for the key. I found it nestled in a dusty box filled with old letters and trinkets. The handwriting on the letters was spidery and faded, filled with a desperate plea for forgiveness. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled with the rusty key. The lock clicked open, and I peered inside. The air inside was heavy and cold, thick with the smell of damp earth. A single flickering light bulb illuminated a set of rickety wooden stairs leading down into the darkness. Fear coiled in my gut, but a morbid curiosity compelled me to descend. The cellar was a place of shadows and whispers, a forgotten realm beneath the house where time seemed to stand still. The air hung heavy with the weight of forgotten things, thick with dust and the scent of old memories. Cobwebs clung to every surface, weaving intricate patterns in the dim light, and the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water from an unseen leak, echoing through the silence. The smell was overpowering, a musty, earthy aroma that spoke of decay and neglect, as if the very walls were exhaling the breath of ages past. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I began to make out the shapes of objects scattered around the room, each one a relic of a bygone era. There were old furniture pieces draped in dusty sheets, their forms barely recognizable under layers of grime and neglect. Broken toys scattered on the floor, remnants of childhoods long forgotten, and stacks of rotting books piled haphazardly against the walls, their pages curling and yellowed with age. And then I saw it. In the furthest corner, shrouded in shadow, stood a large, ornate mirror, its presence commanding and eerie. Its silver backing was tarnished with age, and the glass was cloudy and distorted, reflecting a world that seemed just out of reach. But even in the dim light, I could see that it was no ordinary mirror. It seemed to pulse with a faint, ethereal glow, as if it held secrets of its own. It seemed to pulse with a faint, ethereal glow, drawing me closer with an almost magnetic pull. As I drew closer, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, a chill that seemed to emanate from the very core of the mirror. A sense of dread washed over me, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the core. This house harbored a dark secret, one that had been hidden away for generations, and I had just stumbled upon its heart, a discovery that would change everything I thought I knew about this place. Section 4. The Forbidden Cellar. Each night the whispers grew louder, the shadows more distinct. It was as if the very walls of the house were alive, breathing and murmuring secrets that I was never meant to hear. The air grew colder, and an unsettling chill would creep up my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. They seemed to beckon me, to draw me back to the cellar. The pull was almost magnetic, an irresistible force that tugged at my very soul. I could feel an invisible hand guiding me, urging me to uncover the secrets hidden within the darkness. One night, unable to resist the pull any longer, I found myself standing once more before the ornate mirror. Its intricate frame seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and the glass surface shimmered as if it were a portal to another world. The air around it seemed to shimmer and distort. It was as if reality itself was bending, warping under the weight of some unseen force. The atmosphere grew thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel my heartbeat quicken in response. I reached out a trembling hand to touch its cold, smooth surface. The moment my fingers made contact, a jolt of electricity shot through me, and I felt a connection, a bridge between my world and whatever lay beyond the glass. As I did, I felt a surge of energy pass through me, and the mirror clouded over with a swirling mist. The mist seemed alive, twisting and turning, forming shapes and patterns that were both mesmerizing and terrifying. An image began to form. At first it was just a blur, a vague outline, but slowly it became clearer, more defined. I could see the contours of a face, the hollow eyes staring back at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. It was a young woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with terror. Her expression was one of sheer desperation, as if she were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. She was dressed in a white gown, now stained and torn. The fabric clung to her frail frame, and I could see the faint outlines of bruises and scars, telling a story of pain and suffering. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back, tangled and matted. It looked as though it hadn't been brushed in years, adding to her ghostly, dishevelled appearance. She reached out from the mirror, her fingers scraggly and thin, her mouth forming silent words. I could almost hear her voice, a faint whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled back in horror, my heart pounding in my chest. The room seemed to spin, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the reality of what I had just witnessed began to sink in. The image flickered and faded, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the now clear glass. I could see the fear etched on my face, my eyes wide and unblinking, as if I was still trapped in that moment of terror. I fled the cellar, the screams of the woman echoing in my ears. Her cries seemed to follow me, haunting my every step, a constant reminder of the horrors that lay hidden in the Forbidden Cellar. Section 5. The Haunting Presence. The haunting grew stronger after that night. It was no longer subtle whispers and fleeting shadows. Objects moved across rooms on their own. Disembodied laughter echoed through the hallways. A palpable chill settled over the house, seeping into our bones. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the chandelier above us began to sway violently. The candles sputtered and died, plunging us into darkness. A cold wind swept through the dining room, and the temperature plummeted. As we fumbled for a light, we heard a blood-curdling scream. It was my husband. He clutched at his chest, his face contorted in terror. He pointed a trembling finger towards the corner of the room. "There!" he gasped. "The woman in the mirror!" I followed his gaze and felt my blood run cold. Standing in the shadows was the ghostly figure from the mirror, her eyes burning with a cold, malevolent light. Section 6. A night of terror. Panic seized us. We stumbled over chairs in our haste to escape the dining room. The ghostly figure glided towards us, her ragged gown trailing behind her. We barricaded ourselves in the master bedroom, the sounds of her enraged cries echoing through the house. The temperature plummeted, and frost began to form on the windows. Furniture rattled, and paintings flew off the walls as the ghostly presence attempted to force its way inside. We huddled together in the center of the room, fear constricting our throats. The house seemed to groan and shudder around us, as if it were alive with the fury of the tormented soul trapped within its walls. Section 7. The presence remains. The events of that night are a blur in my memory. I remember the terror, the bone-chilling cold, and the feeling of utter helplessness. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky with the promise of a new day, the haunting ceased. We fled that house, leaving behind all our possessions, desperate to escape the nightmare that had taken root within its walls. But some things cannot be outrun. The memory of that night, the ghostly woman in the mirror, and the chilling cold that seeped into my bones have stayed with me. Now, years later, I sit alone in my quiet room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. But the silence is deceptive, for I know, deep in my heart, that the presence in the shadows still remains, and it waits, ever patient, for the day it can claim its next victim.